The continent of Yggdra is under attack by the Black King and his army of undead monsters born out of darkness and black magic. To put an end to his reign of tyranny, a dumb but brave knight, Yuri gathers strong forces from around the nation to form the volunteer army and leads it into the Black King's castle. Outside on the battlefield, the daughter of the late Holy King, Juliana, leads the Holy Guard alongside her special knights, Ares and Burkhart, to fight against the monsters at the castle's entrance and prepares to march inside. Meanwhile, the general of the Black Army, Irenaeus, rains down energy blasts on the volunteer army and dominates the battlefield. Juliana's commander, Einslot, calls her out and challenges her to a one-on-one fight, while four strong fighters known as the Disciples of the Three Wise Sages fight against an earth golem and destroy it with their power abilities. The first lord of the Ober tribes, Shua, cuts down his enemies with his cool swordsmanship and rallies his troops under the command of tribe leaders to wipe out all the undead soldiers. On the other hand, Yuri leads a 5-man squad into the castle consisting of his waifu number 1, Funa, emergency food and pixie, Pirika, and his strong party members, Kane, Marina, and Mashida. They fight the undead monsters inside the throne room and slay all of them with their abilities. After that, Yuri points his sword towards the Black King and tells him that he will take his head and free the continent of his darkness. He charges his sword with mana and dashes forward with a burst strike to take him out. But it turns out that he didn't grind hard enough and is super under-leveled for this final boss fight. He thinks that his plot armor would be enough to win it all, but the Black King doesn't buy it and walks out of the dust cloud hole holding his defeated ass. He throws the defeated hero on the side and walks up to his daughter Funa and asks her to give him the Chain Chronicle, which is a mysterious book with the ability to change the future of this world. She refuses to give the book back and he slaps her on the ground like a true Asian dad. Pirika flies up in front of him and tells him to stop, but the Black King grabs her like an insect and starts squishing her into pixie mush. She is the Fairy of Hope, and by killing her, he will be able to rid the world of stupid ideas like rising up against him. But then Juliana arrives on the scene with her knights and shoots him in the hand with an arrow. The Black King summons more dark soldiers for them to fight against and then grabs the book from Funa's hands. The book starts shining and they both start pulling at it like stupid kids and end up tearing it in two halves. When that happens, Pirika suddenly vanishes from his hands and goes missing, while the book starts spewing out dark element and covers the entire holy capital, marking the defeat of the stupid hero, Yuri. His friends pull him and the others out of the castle, and they retreat to their camp away from the battlefield and wait for Yuri to wake up. Marina and Funa look after Yuri while Princess Juliana regroups with her knights, Burkhart and Wayne, and discuss the state of the Yggdra Alliance and Volunteer Army. After failing the attack on the Black King, the Alliance's forces are all returning to their countries, and in Yuri's current condition, it will take quite some time before they can group up once again to fight the Black King. Burkhart feels skeptical of Yuri's potential and calls him out, but Juliana says that they all put their faith in him because he's the one who brought them all together to fight against the Black King under one banner. As the forces march away, the commander of the former Holy Capital's force leaves Wayne, Ares, and Burkhart in charge of protecting the princess. They decide to stay there and wait for Yuri's awakening to see what he wants to do from now on. After some time, Yuri wakes up and Funa calls everyone to gather in his tent. They ask him for his orders and he says that from now on they will just march back to the vice capital and report their loss to the master of the Adventurers Guild, Gilbert. He seems really down and we find out that he also suffers from the blackening, which slowly takes over people's bodies and eventually turns them into Dark Knights under the Black King's command. So far, Yuri has been fighting against it with plot armor and willpower. But after getting his ass owned by the main villain, he has lost faith in himself and the blackening keeps growing stronger. In a little village outside the vice capital, a poor old lady tries to buy an apple for a copper coin. The shopkeeper tells her that inflation is super high and she can't buy shit with that. Just then, a big fatso walks in and throws the old lady away. He hands over his gold coins and buys the whole basket for himself. Just then, a white-haired Assassin's Creed cosplayer walks in front of him and tells him to move his stinky ass aside. He then moves around him using fancy tricks and helps the old lady up. As she walks away, the kid cuts off the fat guy's trousers and lets the whole world see his tiny toothpick. While his blinding jewels are on full display, he grabs a couple of apples and runs away like the thief he is. Later on, he meets up with the old lady and gives her an apple for free and carries her back to her home. It turns out his parents went out to buy milk and never came back, so he grew up on the streets thinking he is Robin Hood. On the other hand, Yuri is traveling towards the vice capital with his party, and on their way, they see the aftermath of their war as the dark corruption takes over the land and kills crops and livestock. The farmers look at Yuri and throw mud at his sweaty face and tell him that he is a pathetic loser who failed to fulfill his promise to protect them and their land. Yuri's group silently continues moving forward, and eventually they see a man running towards them asking for help. The man tells them that they are under attack by the Black Army, and Yuri realizes how the influence of the Black Fog has increased due to his loss. They move forward and see a young white-haired kid protecting an old lady from the Dark Knights. Burkhart and the others charge forward and start slaying the monsters and notice that their mana is weakened for some reason. The kid uses his magic and it boosts everyone else's mana. He keeps fighting and steals some of Burkhart's mana to keep going. Stating his willingness to never give up, Yuri remembers how he was just like him as well and decides to take up his sword as well. They both cross eyes during the fight and start doing the monsters back to back. Yuri uses his mana enhancing ability as well and notices that it's stronger due to the white-haired kid's ability. He then jumps forward and kills all the enemies with his special move. Seeing this, the kid realizes that he is Yuri of the volunteer army and introduces himself as Aram. After that, he falls down and becomes unconscious. Yuri says that he's probably exhausted and carries him to their camp outside the village. Later that night, Aram wakes up and sits down with Yuri. He says that he heard about him being the captain of the volunteering army and hands over his armband. Just then, Fuina walks out and greets him. She says that Kane and the others will soon come back from their patrol and starts preparing food for them. Once they all sit down for dinner, Kane notices that, as usual, it is Fuina who cooked this bad-tasting meal and wonders when he will get to eat good food. But then they all become surprised to see Aram munching on his portion like a pig, and he even asks for seconds. He asks him if he likes her cooking, and what does he even eat normally for him to like that. Aram says that he normally eats lizards and insects, and even Bear Grylls start feeling sad for him. Yuri says that he doesn't look like he lived in that village and why he risked his life to save its people. Aram says that he was just passing by, but he can't just leave them to die, and besides that, he also hates those black monsters. He then says that he still needs to grow much stronger, and suddenly, the Ripped Chain Chronicle starts spewing dark element out of it, just like in a capital. When things start looking crazy, Arma jumps in and tries to protect Funa, but the book pushes him back and then stops shining as well. Funa notices that some of its pages have gone dark, and it is an indication of the corruption spreading even more in this world. She explains that any darkness that stains this book reflects on the world, and any corruption that spreads in the world makes its pages dark. But there's still hope because their friend Pirika is still alive somewhere, and as long as she is alive, the world cannot be plunged into darkness fully. She is the will of the world itself, and they must find and save her. On the other hand, the Black King's general, Ernest, locates Yuri's group and its destination using a crow. After that, she reports back to the Black King and he tells her that they must find Pirika and kill her or else they won't be able to take over the world using their darkness. Later that night, Yuri walks up to Aram and asks him why he wants to grow stronger. Aram looks at his stupid face and says that without power, you can't really do much of anything in this world. Yuri asks him why he doesn't join them, and Aram replies that he doesn't like being under anyone's command and likes his freedom. Yuri argues that he can only do so much alone, but Aram says that he has always been alone, and that's how he likes to roll. Yuri says that he is just lucky that he hasn't died fighting alone yet, and Aram counters by saying that he even lost with his friends beside him. Yuri looks at him and says that when he lost against the Black King, he lost faith in himself as well, but seeing him fight so bravely in the village, he remembered that he swore to never give up like Naruto. So when he came back to his senses, he saw his friends by his side ready to support him as usual. He then tells him that he sees potential in him and knows that if he fights alongside them and strengthens his bonds, he will be able to grow much stronger. The next morning, they reach the vice capital and notice that it is under attack by the Black Army. The city is being run down with dark soldiers, and the royal guards are doing their best to hold them off. Yuri and his group join the fight and start killing monsters as well. Yuri meets up with the commander of the guards and they exchange reports about the situation. The commander says that the outer wall has already been destroyed while Yggdra the mage is defending the west wall by the slums. Yuri says that they will deal with the enemies here and lets them go back up the mage. Juliana uses a mana boosting spell and buffs her knights while Aram fights in his solo style. During the fight, he steals some mana from Burkhart once again, and this makes him really mad. They get into an argument and he says that he will deal with him after the battle and goes back to his team. On the other hand, Yuri uses a mana sync combo attack with Kane and Mishita, and they surprise Aram by taking down all the enemies in the area with their attack. Aram asks Yuri to train him and to teach him how to use that attack, and Yuri tells him that it requires him to have a strong bond with his partners. Burkhart steps in and says that Aram won't understand because he's just a mana-stealing monkey who only fights for himself. Aram becomes mad and runs away saying he will get stronger in his own way. Just then, the leader of the enemy's army steps inside the city and reveals himself to be a dark knight. The black fog around them starts thickening up and it reduces all of their mana levels as well. The monsters charge in and injure Yuri and start overwhelming the others as well. One of them manages to throw a strong attack spell at Juliana, but Burkhart jumps in and tanks the hit for her and gets severely injured. The enemies decide to finish him off, but just then, Aram jumps in and starts killing a bunch of them using his fast combat skills. After that, he starts gathering his mana and shares it with Juliana and her knights, including Burkhart. Thanks to that, they are able to use their mana sync combo attack and defeat all the enemies in the area. Aram says that he decided to stick around for some time after all because he wanted to see more of their combo attacks, and he also wanted to make Burkhart eat his own words. Once the battle is over, Yuri gathers everyone around him and says that he has lost to the Black King once, and when he did, the Black King told him that he will destroy this whole world. He then says that he wants there to be hope for as long as he lives, and so he is going to create a Black King suppression squad and fight him once more. Juliana says that a squad won't be enough, and so they should gather forces from around the world once again, and they all agree to help him and become happy that he is finally back to his usual motivated self. Juliana looks at Burkhart and says that now they are equal, that he returned his mana so he should praise him as well, but he just feels salty and excuses himself. But then he falls down on the ground and reveals a nasty wound on his stomach. The next morning, they heal his injuries and Juliana tells him that she wants him to join Yuri's team as she thinks that he will be very useful to them. He insists to stay by her side, but she says that she will go to the capital and regroup with her forces and wants him to help Yuri in her stead. Besides that, she also sees potential in Aram, so she wants him to train him and help him grow stronger as much as he can with his experience. He accepts her order but feels like he was abandoned and starts feeling sad internally. Just then, the sub-leader of the Guild Alliance, Celine, walks in and asks Juliana to come with her to meet their leader, Gilbert. Meanwhile, Yuri and Fona walk alongside Gilbert and discuss the state of the guild. Yuri tells him about his wish to form a Black King suppression squad and says that even though he has lost once, he thinks there's still hope while looking down at Aram practicing his moves. They then go to his office and he says that they will first go to see the 3 wise sages to get any leads on where Perica could be. Gilbert says that he will assist them as much as he can, and just then Celine also arrives with Juliana. Gilbert gives her and Yuri new long-distance magic communication items and says that the guild will help them as much as they can when the time comes. On the other hand, Aram becomes hungry from all his training, and being the poor ass he is, he starts walking around the town and thinks about stealing some food once again. But then he remembers that he is now Yuri's friend and how he has put his faith in him, so he decides against it and just keeps on walking. Just then, he hears a girl screaming and rushes towards the main market where he sees a man threatening a girl with his knife. Aram jumps in and strikes his knife away from his hand and protects the girl. After that, he dodges the man's attacks with his sick moves and borrows a short sword from the weapon dealer's stall on the side. He then fights back and easily captures the evil guy and lets the city guards take him away. Just then, the arms dealer calls out to him and says that he is really impressive. He introduces himself as Dusty from the Merchants Guild and reveals that he supplies weapons to the volunteer army. He then tells him that he has a good eye for picking swords as it is the best one in his stock, and explains that a renowned blacksmith and chief of the Earth Sprites, Balder. He then says that he saw him join Yuri in his quest to make the Black King suppression army, and says that he can have the sword as a gift for his enlistment. He then tells him to give it a name as well because all good swords deserve one, and says that it is up to him if it will become famous or forgotten, so he should work really hard. Aram thanks him a lot and then walks back to the training ground to continue his practice. Meanwhile, Gilbert spends some time with Yuri and reveals that his own blackening has grown quite a bit. He says that sometimes he dreams about fighting alongside the Black King's army, and Yuri says that he won't let that happen. In the meantime, Burkhart passes by the training ground and sees Aram practicing his swings. He thinks about his orders and tells him to loosen up as his muscles are too tense. He then looks at his sword and asks him what was up with that. Aram says that it is called Hirameki Maru, which means flash of inspiration. Burkhart asks where his poor ass got it from, and Aram says that someone gave it to him. Burkhart grabs his arm and says that no one would simply give away such a nice sword to him and accuses him of stealing it. Just then, Juliana passes by alongside Yuri and Wayne and asks what was happening. When Burkhart says that Aram must have stolen the sword, Dusty walks in and says that he is the merchant who gave the sword away to him. Burkhart feels ashamed and apologizes for his mistake and walks away from there like the salty loser he is. Later that night, Yuri struggles with his growing blackening, which starts showing him illusions of his dark and corrupted self that talks shit to him, just like that depressing voice in y'all's heads in the comment section. While he argues with the voice in his head, Aram knocks on the door and walks in to talk to him. He thanks him for believing in him and says that he used to steal before, but he has given up on it after joining his army. Yuri asks him what he will do after becoming stronger, and Aram says that he will take down those stupid monsters in the Black Army. He then reveals that his village was attacked and he was the only survivor. They took everything away from him, and so he wants to avenge his friends and family, and that's why he wants to grow stronger. The next day, they all prepare to depart. They meet up with the commander, and Juliana says that she will go to the holy capital and ask her returning comrades to join the Black King's suppression army. The commander says that he will put his word in with the guild as well, but he can't guarantee how many, if any at all, would be on board to join the army. He then turns around towards Yuri and tells him that the leader of the magic guild, Yggdra, said that she would be joining them as well. Just then, they see Yggdra walk in alongside the legendary dragon slayer, Vorg. Aram becomes fascinated by Vorg's sword, Dragon Killer, and they both make an introduction as well. Meanwhile, Juliana tells Burkhart to do his duty well, and that she is sure that he would understand if he spends more time traveling with Yuri's group. After that, they say their goodbyes, and Juliana's group part ways with Yuri and his friends. Yuri's group also departs to meet the three great sages and move forward until dusk. As they set their camp for the night, Yuri walks up to Burkhart and asks him to train Aram during their journey, but he excuses himself and walks away into the woods for a walk. It seems Uranus has her eyes on him, and his wound starts bleeding dark elements. His negative thoughts and emotions take over as he feels more and more rejected, and that's when Uranus approaches him and stabs him with more of the dark element and tells him that he was abandoned and so he should join their side, which will accept him with open arms. Just then, the Chain Chronicles start going crazy once again, and they see black fog coming from the forest. Yuri thinks about the salty night and runs into the forest while others follow behind him. They soon spot Uranus standing in front of Burkhart and attack her with arrows and magic spells. She blocks their attacks and then summons dark soldiers to fight them off. Vorg and Aram slice through them easily, and Burkhart also stands up on his feet. Yuri sees that and decides to use a mana sync combo attack with him and his team and tells Kane and Mashida to prepare. They all sync up their attacks and launch them towards the enemies, but then Burkhart lets go of his pride and lets himself be consumed by darkness. The Black King's magic flows through him, and he transforms into a demon as well and emerges from the black burst of energy as a demonized Dark Knight. He goes in to strike Aram, but Yuri jumps in and tries to parry his attacks. They duel for a little bit before everyone else jumps in to provide support, but Burkhart uses his newfound power to strike them all back with a dark crystallization attack and decides to go full berserk. But then, Uranus steps in and tells him that it is enough for today and that she has come to bring him home, and then teleports them both back to the Black King's castle. Once things settle down, Yuri contacts Juliana and informs her about Burkhart's defection and him joining the Black King's army as a demon. Hearing this, Juliana feels really sad and wonders about her decision to send him with Yuri. Just then, Ares rides towards them and says that the holy capital is on fire. They immediately rush towards the city and find out that there is a revolution breaking out with some people grouping up and destroying things and setting things on fire in the name of the Black King. They think that if they do all this, they will be able to transform into a demon and get accepted in the Black King's army. With the Holy King down and the volunteer army also losing the battle, there is no hope left for them unless they join the Black King, and that's what the capital is dealing with. The Holy Capital's army commander, Einslot, leads his men against the stupid civilians and manages to get the situation under control by capturing them all. Once things calm down a bit, he discusses the situation with his officers, but just then they see a kid trying to throw a bomb into an official building. It looks like they won't make it, but then Ares arrives on the scene and manhandles the kid into submission. Juliana and Wayne soon follow behind and meet up with Einslot and ask him for a report. Juliana tells Ares to let the kid go and asks him to speak what he wants. The kid says that he wants to become a demon and join the Black King's army, as it is the only way for them to survive, but Juliana becomes mad and gives him a long speech on why it's bad. After using Talk no Jutsu and wasting a few tears over Burkhart turning into a demon, she rides away and goes inside the royal palace. There she meets up with her friend Louise, whom she left in her place to act as acting queen. They group up with Einslot and discuss their plan moving forward. Wayne comes in with a report that the forces of the 9 territories are stationed outside the holy capital led by Shua. Their army is still recovering from the battle against the Black King, and it will be a while before they move back to their territories. Wayne suggests that they go and ask them to join the Black King's suppression army, and Juliana agrees. She gives the order to send a messenger to Shua and waits for their reply. On the other hand, Yuri's group also feels bummed out about losing a strong knight to the enemy forces, but decides to move forward regardless. On their way, Yuri stops by to clean off his blackening arm, and Funa notices how bad it has become. He walks out and forces him down and tells him to let her help stop the disease. She takes out Chain Chronicles and uses it to reduce the blackening, but unfortunately, it doesn't work this time. She feels really sad about being powerless in this situation and starts crying about it. After that, they continue their journey towards the Sage's Tower, and Aram becomes really excited to see it. Yuri explains that they are there to meet the Sage of Destiny, who might have a clue on Perica's whereabouts. They continue moving towards the tower, but suddenly they get attacked by a fire spell. Yggdra jumps forward and blocks it and reveals that they are under attack by the Sage's army led by their top disciples Velnir, Yuni, and Kadja. They suddenly hear the voice of one of the sages, Melchior, and Yuri shouts out that he is there to seek help from the sages to fight against the Black King once again. Melchior says that if they want their help, they must prove their might and orders Velnir to continue attacking. Yggdra, Vor, Mishita, Cain, and Yuri defend against the attacks raining down on them while Aaron rushes forward and manages to close the gap between him and the caster. He tries to attack Velnir, but Yuni blocks it with her sword. Yuri soon follows up to help him and they start pushing them back, but then Velnir doubles down on his offensive spells and decides to finish them off as Yggdra's mana starts running low. He casts a strong fire spell, but Aram notices it just in time and shares his mana with Yggdra and lets her defend the team. After that, she was full Madara mode and summons a rain of meteorites from the sky. In the distance, Melchior seems to be enjoying the show, but fellow sage, Dilma, walks in and tells him to stop playing his childish games. Back on the battlefield, Aram chases after Yuni and tries to fight her back, but the third sage, Fatima, jumps in and stops the battle from going any longer. After that, they all walk in and Funa introduces the sages to Aram. The sages bring the conversation to the topic of defeating Black King, and Melchior explains that since their defeat, the king's castle has been emitting high-density dark element non-stop. This has formed a barrier around the building and it will be really hard to get past it. Besides that, it has also increased the blackening of the surrounding regions. Dilma asks them if they believe people would follow them after knowing this, and Yuri says that he will fight the Black King regardless of whether he has followers or not. Fatima says that they should follow the path they believe in, and then Yuri asks her about Perica's whereabouts. Being the Sage of Destiny, Fatima tells him that Perica is alive, but she is somewhere from where she cannot come out herself. While she cannot tell them where that place is exactly, there is still hope. Besides that, they should go to Maze Pass, and that is decided to be our next destination. After that, they all sit down and rest for a while, and Aram runs into Velnir, and he asks him what those emo-looking tattoos were for on his body. It looks like they both might get into a fight, but just then the fourth disciple, Klaus, walks by and tells them to chill. He also explains that those tattoos were actually runes called the Mark of a Sealer, and they made him really strong. Aram becomes excited and asks if that's why he can use all that cool magic, and Velnir asks if he wants to see more. After that, he compliments him on his battle sense and teamwork, as well, and wonders about his unique ability to share mana. Aram asks him why they don't help them fight the Black King's army, and he says that they are fighting them, but only when they attack the Sage's Tower, and they are all bound by the Sage's orders. On the other hand, Yggdra and Vorg reveal that they will be staying behind in the tower to look for ways to defeat the Black King and get past the strong barrier around the castle. She also seems to have some kind of history with Melchior, as they are always angry and taunting each other. Once all this is settled, Yuri and his group prepare to leave for Maze Pass and decide to go to the Island of Sprites after that to ask Yggdra about Perica's whereabouts. As they are about to leave, the four disciples walk towards them and reveal that they will be going with them, as well as per the orders of Melchior. They say that he is interested in some ancient artifact that was recently discovered in Maze Pass, so they are going there to investigate it. A few days later, as they move through Maze Pass, they notice that the whole place is covered in a black blizzard. It's a snowstorm mixed with dark element and is continuously spawning and reviving undead dark soldiers. Yuri's group fights them throughout their way, but Marina proves to be the most useful one in this journey, as her healing magic can purify and erase undead monsters. Aram calls her out and says how even she can be useful during fights, and this makes her mad at him. Just then, they notice a small squeaking ball of fur running towards them while being chased to death by an army of undead black soldiers. The little monster jumps and hides behind Aram, while Velnir burns the undead monsters with his OP fire spell. The attack ends up being too strong, and it breaks away the snow beneath their feet as well, and Aram ends up falling down the cliff. Yuri tries to help him, but he falls down as well, and Velnir looks at everyone and says oops. With all of them down, Kaguya asks them what they should do now, and Cain suggests that they meet up with the local Earth sprites as planned and then ask them for help to rescue Yuri and Aram. Meanwhile, Yuri and Aram start walking forward down the cliff with the little fur monster. Aram decides to take it in and names it Furball. After walking for a little while, Yuri suggests that they stop there and dig a snow cave for themselves to camp in. Soon, night falls and Aram tries to use the magic communication item, but it doesn't work. Yuri says that it must be due to the Black Blizzard, and says that they will wait there as he's sure his friends will come rescue them alongside the Earth Sprites. Aram asks why he is so sure about them coming to rescue him, and he says that it's because he has traveled with them a lot and trusts them fully. He then gives him a pep talk on the importance of forming bonds and having nakamas. Aram says that he doesn't really understand it because he has always been on his own, but he feels envious of him. After that, they wait for quite some time and Aram starts falling asleep. Yuri wakes him up and tells him to stay awake as it can be dangerous to fall asleep in this situation. He then suggests playing some verbal mini-games and Aram starts laughing at him. He then says that he will go take a leak and then they can play the game and go out. While outside, he notices that Furball is gone and starts looking around and gets surrounded by thick black fog. On the other hand, when Aram doesn't come back soon enough, Yuri walks out to look for him. He calls out his name and continues searching for him in the harsh snowstorm, and his negative thoughts start taking shape in this black blizzard. It tells him to leave Aram behind and that it was his fault for getting lost even though he warned him. It uses anti-Nakama Talk no Jutsu on him and starts fighting him physically as well by manifesting into a dark soldier. The emotional damage starts piling up and Yuri starts losing his grip, but then Aram jumps in and defeats the dark soldier for him. He then tells him how he still doesn't understand all this talk about bonds and friendship, but he thinks that it means he can help him when he's weak and needs to rely on his friends. This brings Yuri back to his senses, and he prepares a Mana Sync combo attack with Aram, and they finally manage to pull it off together, making Aram really excited about it. After defeating the monsters, they both group up and talk to each other, and Yuri suddenly notices an old man walking out of the blizzard. Yuri recognizes him as Baltazari and introduces him to Aram as the teacher of the Sage of Destiny, Fatima. Baltazari uses his magic and clears the sky and gets rid of the black blizzard as well. Furball jumps out from behind his hat and reunites with Aram as well. The old wizard looks at Yuri and says that he looks to be drowning in depression just like everyone in the comments section, and tells him that it would be easy if he gives in and becomes emo. But Yuri says that he will continue being a Naruto fan and says that he will never give up, believe it. Hearing this, the Wish.com Dumbledore starts laughing and tells him to go to the desert oasis and defeat the new dragon there, and it will help him in his quest. After that, he vanishes from the scene like Houdini. On the other hand, Fonet and the others meet up with a representative of the Earth Sprites, Olga, who is in charge of mining out the recently discovered ancient artifact. She tells the fire spirits, Rollo and Kiki, to join them as well and agrees to join the Black King's suppression army and sends out a team to rescue Yuri and Aram. Meanwhile, Funa and Marina stay behind and inspect the artifact, and suddenly, the Chain Chronicle starts shining and reveals a page from the history of the world which explains that there is a sword in the Maze Pass that can cut through all darkness. The rescue team eventually finds Yuri and Aram by dawn, and they bring them back to their camp and party the rest of the day in celebration of their joining of the Black King's suppression army. During the party, Aram also gets to meet the chief of the Earth Sprites, Balder, who crafted his sword. While all this is happening, Juliana's messenger arrives at Shusa's army camp and brings in the message from the princess. But instead of joining them, Shusa kills the messenger. The next day, Yuri and his group head out towards Soul Island across the ocean to find more information about Pirika's whereabouts. On their way, they run into Shusa and his army and happily walk forward to ask him if he is going to join the Black King's suppression army. But to their horror, Shusa points his sword at them and tells Funa to hand over the Chain Chronicle as he is going to defeat the Black King on his own and rule Yggdra himself. Aram becomes mad at him for acting like some edgelord villain and asks him who he was to act like this. Just then, Shusa's younger brother and second in command, Yoshitsugu, walks up and says that they receive an invitation to join the Black King's suppression army as well, but they won't be joining them. Instead, they will fight him in their own way, and for that they need the Chain Chronicle. He then introduces Shusa as the first lord of the 9 territories of fire in the land of ogres and himself as the second lord. Shusa then walks forward and prepares to attack him, but Yuri jumps in and blocks his sword with his own. He tells him to stop fighting and asks if it's not possible for them to join forces and fight together once more, and he says that he had his chance and he lost it because of his soft nature. He reminds him how he told him to use any means necessary to defeat the Black King, even if it meant using his friends as meat shields, which Yuri obviously didn't like. He says that now you will seize this power of darkness himself and conquer the whole world as the true Black King, and pushes him aside. After that, he walks up to Funa and Aram tells her to hand over the book, but she says that the book chooses its owner itself. He says that he knows well enough how to bring others to submission and tries to use force, but Yuri jumps back in and starts fighting him. Shusa's army also starts marching forward towards Yuri's group, and it turns into an all-out war. Kane and Mishita signals to Yuri about using a mana sync combo attack and starts it off by shooting their attacks, but Shua slaps Yuri back into the dust, reminding him of just how useless he is as a hero. After that, he jumps towards Fumina and Aram and beats them both down as well before snatching the magical book from them and unleashing the dark element within it. Seeing this, Yuri becomes mad and starts running towards him with his sword, but suddenly a bunch of lightsabers fall down from the sky, followed by a robot from Elon Musk's failed science projects collection. Just then, Irenas and Burkhart also spawn in and explains that it is called Olzada, and it's an ancient golem meant to bring calamity to the world. She then turns to Shua and invites him to join their side, but he spits at her stupid face and tells her to try some other place. With that, Shua's army starts running towards the two demons, but Olzada attacks them first and then engages with Shua himself. On the other hand, Irenas walks up to Yuri and starts using Evil Talk no Jutsu on him to bring out the darkness within him and reminds him of his increasing blackening as well. While all this is happening back at the Holy Capital, Juliana goes to meet the Holy Clerics and decides to finally inherit her role as the Queen of the Holy Empire and faces her people in this time of need. She holds a public coronation ceremony and uses the mass talk no jutsu style, politician speech technique to rizz up the whole crowd and show them a new ray of hope. Meanwhile, Yuri almost gives into his evil self and becomes an emo guy, but then he remembers the shining words of his favorite anime character, Naruto, and strikes through all the depressing voices inside his head. He then fights Irenas and tells her that he has resolved to defeat the Black King now and he won't lose to her stupid plots. Arma and Fona also see this and decide to help him, but Burkhart jumps in and keeps them busy with his black sword. The fight continues as the battlefield starts swarming full of dark soldiers and Yuri's friends start getting outnumbered severely. Mishita even runs out of her arrows and Marina's mana also starts running low, while Kane and the Second Lord get surrounded by dozens of dark soldiers. Seeing this, Yuri starts panicking as well, and with continued negative talk, emotional damage from Irenas, his mind starts to give in as well. Watching him plunge into darkness, Kane and Funa jump in to protect him, while Yuri gathers up his courage to pieces through his dark self with his sword. He thinks that he is the real hero for doing that, but then he opens his eyes and realizes that in reality, he stabbed Kane, who jumped in at the last moment to protect Funa from getting another hole poked into her. He looks at his best friend and falls on the ground with his sword in his chest and starts crying like a madman. The darkness within him bursts out and all the negative thoughts pour in, and soon enough, he fully gives in to his depression and transforms into a demon. After seeing Yuri turn to the dark side, Shua laughs at him and calls him a scam. He then says that it's all the more reason for him to take him down and shoots an energy slash at him, but Olzada flies in and blocks it with an earth golem. She then summons two more golems to keep him busy, while Burkhart knocks Aram away with his earth wall slash attack. Irenas says that they will have plenty of time to play with them the next time, but for now they must return to the Black King to introduce the newest recruit in their army. With that, she opens up a teleportation portal and they all walk in it and vanish away. After they leave, Aram and the others regroup in a nearby ruin, and Marina does her best to keep Kane alive by using her healing magic. They all look down and depressed with Yuri turning into a demon and wonder what they should do next. Just then, Shua walks by with his army and asks them what they are doing here when their captain has betrayed them and defected to the other side. He then offers the sage's disciples to join his forces if they want to take a real shot at defeating the Black King, but they all refuse to accept his invitation and tell him to take his emo ass out of there. Hearing him speak badly about Yuri, Aram becomes mad and walks out as well. He says that Yuri hasn't betrayed anyone and he's just confused and is waiting for his friends to come and save him. He then tells him to give the book back, but Shua says that if they want it, they would have to take it back by force, and if they are thinking about saving Yuri, then they should hurry or else he would kill him first. On the other side of the map, Yuri meets up with the Black King as Black Knight and says that once he came there to save this world, but now he will see if this world will stand against his darkness, and if it crumbles, then it was never worth protecting in the first place. Back at the ruins, Aram and the others finally find hope and stand back up. Mishita and Marina decide to go back to the vice capital with Kane and to get him healed as soon as possible. The sage's disciples decide to go back to the tower and to report their situation to them. On the other hand, Aram and Fona decide to continue their journey as planned towards the Soul Island to find more information about Parika's whereabouts. With that, they continue their journey towards the Soul Island for the next few days, and on their way, Aram notices how Funa feels extremely down and sad. One night, he sits down with her around the campfire and asks her to tell him about Yuri. He tells her about meeting this old wizard cosplayer during the Black Blizzard, and he mentioned that Yuri once slayed a dragon and asks her how all that happened. Fona becomes quite sad and says that it wasn't a cool adventure and reveals that the dragon was said to be the guardian of the oasis, but it had been infected with the blackening. Due to this, it had gone berserk and destroyed the oasis that it once swore to protect, and that's why they had to fight it. After weakening it, it came back to its senses and requested them to finish him off while he is still sane, and with no other choice, Yuri had to do the dirty job. She then starts crying and says that she should have stopped him and that maybe he became a demon because they put all the pressure on him and made him fight even when he didn't want to. Aram listens to her and then uses Talk no Jutsu and tells her that when he hadn't yet met him, he thought that Yuri was this all-powerful guy who didn't have any support or backing and rose to be the captain of the volunteer army all on his own. But then when he met him in person, he found out that he was nothing like that. In fact, he was quite weak and humane, and he realized that no one is all-powerful and without weakness, and that's why we make friends. He then repeats his words that as his friends know it's their turn to go save Yuri, and this gives Funa some hope as well. With that, they continue their journey and eventually arrive on the shore across Soul Island. Meanwhile, Black Met Yuri also teleports in on the island and things start looking edgy. On the other hand, Marina and Mashida make it to the vice capital and save Kane's life and report to Juliana about their current situation and Yuri's transformation into a demon as well. Juliana resolves to save this world as the Queen of the Holy Empire and says that she will cut down all her enemies, be it Shuza or an evil Yuri, if she must to do it. She then sends out her commander to establish an emergency meeting with Shuza. Back at the Sage's Tower, the four disciples walk in and report to them about all this as well. Melchior is studying the ancient artifact and thinks about making something out of it, while Fatima says that there is a small chance that Yuri's defection to the other side was needed for him to find a new light and makes a request to them to make it happen. Meanwhile, Shuza gathers over 5,000 of his men and calls for even more reinforcement from his territories to make an army that can defeat the Black King. On the other hand, Aram and Funa row a boat towards the Soul Island, and Aram thinks back on his conversation with Yuri. He remembers him telling him about a special fairy that lives in the World Tree Library on the Soul Island called Yggdra. She shares the same name as this continent, and she is special even among the fairies because she possesses a chronicle. After that, they land ashore and immediately get attacked by undead soldiers from the Black Army. Aram runs forward to fight them, but a friendly fairy, Vienta, shoots them all down with her magic and tells them both to follow her to the library. She takes them through the forest and towards the World Tree, and they come out to see the horrible view of Black Army soldiers attacking the whole place and making a mess out of it. Vienta's father, Rafalgar, fights them back and tells them to go inside before it's too late. Just then, Furball screams while looking right, and Aram notices Yuri spawn using dark magic. He immediately attacks them, and Ara starts fighting him back and asks him why he is doing all this. He tries to use Takuma Jutsu on him, but Yuri tells him to shut up and pushes him aside. After that, he follows up with some darkness-infused air/attacks and says that the Black King cannot be defeated, and he will soon understand it as well. Just then, Rafalgar and Vienta jump in and start fighting him instead and tell Aram and Fona to go talk to Yggdra about what they came here for. They both run towards the library and meet up with Yggdra, who is waiting for them at the entrance. They keep running and eventually arrive at the center where Yggdra has her chronicle set up. She activates the book by using her magic and pulls them all into its records. After getting sucked into the world inside the book, Aram notices that they are at the vice capital. Suddenly, the scenery changes and they change locations as well. Fonan explains that this is the Yggdra Chronicle and it contains the most detailed record of the continent and its history. Aram asks how it is different from her Chain Chronicle, and she says that it is in a league of its own as the Chain Chronicle keeps record of the entire world, including this continent and everything outside it. With that, they move towards finding the answer to their question about Pyrrhica. To begin their search, they start from the moment when Yuri lost to the Black King and Pyrrhica vanished from his hand. After that, they move to the time when Yuri was recovering from his defeat and the blackening had started to settle in. But then the whole world starts spinning around them as if someone threw them in a food processor, and it turns out that Yuri has made his way inside the library on the outside, and Vienta grabs the chronicle and runs away with it. And that's why it's a mess inside. Rafalgar tries to hold him off, but his darkness starts corrupting the book as well, and on the inside, Aram gets separated from Funa and Yggdra. He ends up in a time period when Yuri was still a young kid around his age and was just a weak villager. One day he gets attacked by a horde of undead soldiers and he decides to fight them despite his weakness. Just then, a blonde-haired knight arrived on the scene and slashed through all the monsters with his special attack, which looks awfully similar to Yuri's signature move. After that, Yuri sits down with the knight and asks him how to get stronger and says that he wants to be strong so he can protect his village whenever the monsters attack them. The knight tells him that it might require him to train for days, months, and years, and maybe he won't learn the skill still. But if he keeps at it like an annoying kid who wants that toy in the shopping mall, he will one day become strong enough to use that skill. After that, Yuri decided to train day in and day out by hacking away at a tree with his blunt sword. We all hope that someone told him about the existence of axes and saws, but sometimes you need to be a little bit headstrong to become a hero. One day, his village gets attacked by undead monsters once again and he rushes to protect it. He manages to defeat the monsters using the special skill that he learned by practicing all these years, but he proves to be a little too late to save the new ruined village. Despite this, he continued walking forward, but after his defeat against the Black King, he became depressed and the blackening started taking over him. Even then, he did his best to fight against his depressing thoughts and placed all this hope in Aram and told Cain to help him if something were to happen to him. Well, we all know how that turned out so right to that plan, but it's the thought that counts. Just then, the video stops playing and Aram wonders if Yggdra's Netflix subscription ran out, but then the old Gandalf copy, Baltazar, appears in front of him and tells him that they get to meet once again. Aram asks him how he is able to talk to him inside the book, and he says that there is nothing that he cannot do. Aram says that if that's the case, then he wants him to make him stronger so he can defeat Yuri and bring him back to his senses, and makes everyone in the comments section hit their foreheads against the wall because he could have just asked the old man to go and kill the stupid black wizard. Baltazar notices how stupid he is and decides to go easy on him and uses his magic to teleport him on a cliff where he falls down alongside Yuri from before he turned into a demon. Aram holds onto the cliff and grabs Yuri with the other hand while the demon Yuri stands on top of them with his blade pointing towards his hands. He tells him to give up and that he is a pathetic, smelly loser, while the Yuri on the other hand also talks some depressing emo BS and tries to let go. But Aram has had enough of listening to this stuff, so he uses Talk no Jutsu and throws him up towards the demon Yuri and tells him to fight his way out of it. He then gets himself up as well and prepares his attack as well. This time, he tries to copy Yuri's signature move that he saw in his flashback and rushes forward with a piercing strike full of light and destroys demon Yuri. Just then, a bright light starts filling the world and they all hear Parika's voice that she will return when everyone finds the light of hope once again. With that, they all get out of the book and appear in the library. Yuri and the Black Army are already gone and Trafalgar looks to be in bad shape. Vanda walks out with the Yggdra Chronicles and shows that it has been blackened as well. After getting their answer, Fona and Aram get back on the boat and row their way back to the mainland to continue their journey. On the other hand, Juliana is preparing to meet Shua and his army, but on her way, she is confronted by two members of the 9 territories of Fire, Haruaki, and Tuka, and they ask for her help in defeating Shua. They say that if he decides to join the Black King, they would not allow him to continue ruling over them and ask to form an alliance with her as the Holy Queen. After hearing Parika's voice, Aram and Funa travel to the desert oasis called Lake of Sand. There, they talk to the queen of the oasis, Ashrina, and tell her about Baltazar and his advice to Yuri about visiting the oasis as a new guardian dragon will soon appear here. Hearing this, the queen tells her assistant Farah to bring out a secret tablet that they found in the shrine after they defeated the last guardian dragon. It looks to be some kind of music, and Ashrina says that she has always wanted for the legendary forest sprite and songstress, Musica, to sing it. She then orders Farah to go look for the sprite and to bring her here, and Funa asks to accompany her as well. Just then, one of her men walks in and reports that a massive army of 10,000 troops bearing the flag of the 9 territories is approaching them. Aram says that it must be that stupid ogre Shua and says that he will join the fight as well, but then the man says that another army of the same size is already on the ground led by the Holy Queen Juliana. Ashrina sends her advisor Khalifa to the battlefield as a neutral messenger from the desert, and he tells them that if they fight here right now, both parties will suffer bad consequences, and at a time when the Black King is trying to take over the world, he's sure that the Holy Queen or any of the leaders of the 9 territories won't be dumb enough to go on with it. He then offers to host negotiation talks between the two forces and asks them to bring 100 men each and leads them back to the nation. There he meets up with Juliana and congratulates her on her coronation, and just then Aram walks out as well and greets her. She asks him what he was doing there, and he explains that he is there to save Yuri and bring him back to their side, and then turns around to glare at Shua. After that, they walk in to talk out, and Shua begins the negotiations by demanding that Juliana let go of her command of the Holy Army as she is not fit to be their ruler. He then starts rubbing it in by saying how her previous leader, Yuri, defected to the other side, and he heard that one of her personal guards also turned into a demon. Things start looking bad for her, but then one of the troops walks in and says that they are under attack by the Black Army. This time it's only Irenaeus, Burkhart, and Olzada, with an army of several thousand undead soldiers. Shua gets excited and jumps straight into the battle with his long sword. To shut him down, Olzada flies in and breaks into many flying pieces as if she took inspiration from Buggy the Clown. She summons her earth golems and attacks Shua with her lightsabers as well. On the other hand, Juliana confronts Burkhart and he starts attacking her with emotional damage. He tells her how she looks so pathetic fighting Shua like a weakling, and then clashes his sword with her several times before kicking the hell out of her and throwing her back on the ground. He then makes her question her decisions even more by telling her to see the result of her orders and goes for the finishing blow, but Einslot jumps in and blocks his attack. He tells Juliana to leave him up to him and lets her go fight Shua. Meanwhile, Aram stands back to back with Khalifa and he tells him to keep an eye on Shua and Juliana as they are like oil and water and might try to take each other's head during the chaos of this war. On the other side, Shua is busy fighting the flying clown doll and his brother jumps in and snatches his opponent from him. Just then, Juliana tries to sneak attack him, but Shua blocks it at the last moment and sends her back. She jumps back in and clashes her sword with him and tells him to get lost as he is the only one in her way. He tells her the same thing and they both start fighting seriously by buffing themselves with mana. Eventually, Juliana manages to send him back flying with a hard strike, but Shua walks out of it by releasing a massive wave of dark energy. Shua blocks it with an energy wave of her own and they lock themselves in a sword clash once again. As their battle continues, things start becoming more and more intense and they start getting engulfed in darkness. Adaranus watches on from a distance and laughs at these stupid losers making her work easy, but then Aram jumps in with a heavy strike and tells them both to cut it out. Just then, Musica starts singing the song from the tone as well and it makes Furball go all puppy eyes. Aram says that they almost let themselves get sick with blackening and tells them to stop fighting stupid battles. Adaranus doesn't like him interfering in her enemies, killing each other and turning into demons for her to control and sends Olzada down to attack them. Aram taunts Burkhart as well and fights him off, but then they manage to toss his sword out of his hand and go in for the killing blow, but Aram uses a strong mana burst attack and pushes them both behind. Just then, Musica's song finishes as well, and with her plea, Furball transforms into a white tornado and throws out a red legendary class sword at Aram. With the power to cut through darkness, the sword catches on fire and Aram launches a strong wave attack at Olzada and burns her down. The attack also hits Burkhart, but he manages to barely defend himself by blocking it from the side. Just then, the tornado stops spinning and Furball transforms into a massive guardian dragon. The Black Army soldiers also get attacked by some fireballs, and they see the disciples of the three sages join the battle as well. With them having the upper hand now, Adaranus retreats from the battlefield and tells Burkhart to follow suit. Once they are gone, Aram walks up to Shua and tells him to give the Chain Chronicle back because he is not worthy of it. And just then, the book starts shining and becomes totally white once again. It then flies down into Aram's hands and Shua accepts this result. After that, the disciples walk up to Musica and tell her that they are there to get her as they need her help with an ancient artifact. Aram formally requests Juliana to lend her forces to the Black King's suppression army, and they ask Shua to join them as well, but he says that he will walk his own path and marches off with his men. With the dark element concentrating for long enough, the Black King releases his army of reinforced Avark soldiers on the continent in an attempt to take over the world once and for all. On the other hand, Aram and Fumina ride Furball in his dragon form towards the Sage's Tower alongside the Disciples and Musica. There seems to be a similar song written on the ancient relic, and they need her to sing and activate it so they can cut through the dark barrier around the Black King's castle. On their way, they see the massive destruction and corruption of land that the Black King has caused and resolve to end this battle soon by taking his head. They eventually reach the tower and notice a massive airship on the rooftop. It turns out this is the ancient relic found in Maze Pass, and the Fire and Earth Sprite welcome them on board. After landing down, they meet the three sages, and they explain the plan to them. They then ask Musica to sing and see if the darkness piercing mechanism works, and Aram asks if they would have her rock at the barrier during the battle. Melchior says that they will instead do it from inside and reveals that this ancient airship is the most advanced piece of magic and technology, and it has the ability to teleport anywhere in the world in an instant. He explains that they will teleport in with strong troops on board and then use Musica's song to take down the barrier from inside as well. In this way, they will open up a way for their allied forces to march right in and take over the Black King's castle by surprise. After that, they call out the names of the people who will be boarding the ship and announce that it will be the two fire spirits, the four disciples, Fumina and Aram with his dragon Furball. Aram asks if they will be leaving immediately, but Melchior says that it will take some time for this old piece of beautiful junk to start up after staying hidden for so long. He then begins casting the launching spell, and they all wait for the engines to start. During this time, Aram gets his sword polished by Baldur and he praises him for growing stronger since the last time they met. After that, Aram goes out and meets up with Velnir. He tells him that they need to talk and asks Aram if he will be able to kill Yuri when the time comes, and if not, then he should stay off the ship. Aram looks at him and says that he would bring Yuri back to his senses, and while he might not be looking at the whole picture right now, he is sure of what he needs to do. Velnir praises him and tells him to give it his best shot and then leaves him alone. Aram then walks out and meets up with Fona on the main deck of the ship and asks her if she loves Yuri. She starts blushing red like a tomato, but then realizes that she is speaking to Aram, and he's probably saying it in some headstrong way. He says that he loves the guy a lot because he changed his life and he has learned so much from him. That's why he wants to bring him back even if he has to beat the living hell out of his ass, and asks her to help him as well. She tells him that she washed up on this continent when her homeland got destroyed by the Black Army. She didn't have any memories of her past life and had this mysterious book in her hands, and for some reason these monsters wouldn't stop chasing after her. That's why Yuri saved her and invited her into his team. From that day on, her life has been full of happiness as she found peace in the various things that Yuri showed her. And with this hope that their friend is still alive inside that demon, they both resolve to bring him back. Just then, Burkhart arrives on the scene with a blast and lands inside the ship. He starts attacking Aram and tries to snatch the chain chronicle from Funa, but Aram pushes him back and tells Funa to run. The salty demon knight summons a few dozen dark soldiers and orders them to attack them at once. Velnir and the others soon arrive on the scene and start shooting spells left and right, and it soon transforms into a massive battle between them and the Black Army. The Great Sage, Dilma, contacts Juliana and orders her to march her forces immediately to the Black King's castle, while everyone on the ship holds off Burkhart and his stupid force of undead soldiers. The fight starts getting intense as Aram faces off against the salty knight, and they wait for Musica to get on board. Once she's there, they make Melchior start the engine so they can take off, but a dark soldier manages to corrupt the power rune, and it starts sucking everyone's mana and turns them into stupid vegetables. Things start looking grim as Yggdra runs out of mana once again, but Velnir continues shooting fireballs and attacks Burkhart. This gives Aram enough time to concentrate his mana and share it with Yggdra, and then he shoots a powerful stream of mana into the magic rune as well, and it starts the airship instantly. With that, they enter the teleportation portal and zoos through it and instantly spawns outside the Black King's palace. During their journey, Burkhart manages to attack the ship and makes the engine blow up. He then knocks Funa out and takes her with him inside the castle to see the Black King. Meanwhile, the airship crashes into several rocky peaks and lands after getting severely damaged. With the airship crashing inside, things look bad for our heroes, but luckily, all of them survive and Furball manages to save Musica as well. Outside the barrier, Juliana and Ashrina lead their armies to march in and wait for the barrier to go down. But then they see the airship crash inside and wonder if their plan failed. On the inside, Aram and his friends fight off against the Black Army, and Aram puts Furball in charge of keeping Musica safe. It takes her to the ancient artifact and lets her sing the song, and just like that, the dark element barrier starts lowering down. With that, the allied forces march in and start fighting the Black Army, and once again the fate of the world is on their shoulders as they stand outside the Black King's castle, ready to take his head. While all this is happening outside, Burkhart brings Funa inside the castle, and Yuri binds her up with his magic and takes the other half of Chain Chronicle from her and gives it to the Black King. The Black King calls out to Pyrrhica and says that he will snuff out no matter what, and then corrupts the light half of the book with his dark magic. He combines both pieces and makes the whole volume corrupted and begins his plan to plunge the world into darkness. On the other hand, Aram marches in with the 4 disciples and slices through the hordes of undead soldiers from the Black Army. An earth golem appears in front of them, but Velnir puts it down with a strong fire spell and blocks the path with debris to prevent the monsters from chasing after Aram. He tells him to go save Yuri and holds the line alongside his fellow disciples. Aram keeps moving forward, and the Black King tells Yuri that he should know what to do about this pesky little boy and lets him deal with him. Meanwhile, outside the castle, Juliana leads the allied forces and they fight the Black Army into the ground. Things look good for them so far, but then Arenas appears on the scene and she summons more stronger undead soldiers to fight against them. To stop her from being a problem, Einslot steps up and decides to fight her one-on-one, while Juliana gets to clash swords against Burkhart once again. Burkhart uses his earth magic and summons a large pillar from the ground and forms it into an arena around the queen. He asks her if the weight of the crown is so heavy that she can't even stand straight, and to his surprise, Juliana says yes. She says that she was never made to do all this, but given their situation, she will do her best and put an end to this war. She charges up her mana into her sword and prepares to fight him, but Burkhart flies down with his sword and pushes her back against a wall and stabs the sword into the wall beside her. He then grabs her hand and asks her if she's trying to avoid her true responsibility, but she puts her hand on his face and says that she isn't, and right now she is facing her responsibility, which is him. Feeling the effects of Talk no Jutsu, Burkhart pushes her back through the wall and sends her flying, but she stops herself from falling down, and while doing so, Burkhart's badge of Royal Guard falls down from her pocket. He picks it up and starts getting flashbacks of when he first became a knight and swore to protect the poor princess, and then looks at her now standing in front of him as a beautiful and capable queen, ready to free him of his misery with all her might. He gets mesmerized by her light and just stands still as Juliana charges her attack and cuts through him with full force. His corpse falls down amidst the holy army, and Juliana walks down and covers it with the holy flag, letting him rest as one of her own. Inside the castle, the Black King supercharges Chain Chronicle with dark magic, and the whole place starts shaking like that Taylor Swift song. The area around the castle fills up with dark elements, and the undead soldiers gain a massive stat boost. They push the allied forces back and then shoot Musica down with a beam of dark magic. With her down, the dark elemental barrier starts forming once again, and Juliana worries that without Musica, they will lose their line of retreat. The undead soldiers start flooding inside the barrier and overwhelm the limited allied forces inside. Now stronger due to the dark element buff given by the Black King, they are able to take down regular soldiers much easily, and things start looking grim for them. Einslot also starts losing against Irenaeus, and she wonders what they are fighting for. When he tells her that he is fighting for the bonds of friendship that he has, she becomes annoyed and decides to shoot Juliana down. Her attack is about to land on her, but just then, Shua arrives on the scene with his army and protects Juliana with his strong energy blade attack. Meanwhile, Aram walks into the main hall and confronts Yuri in his demon form. Yuri jumps down and attacks him with his massive sword, but Aram blocks it with his own and starts pushing him back with fast attacks. While fighting, he asks him why he turned to the dark side and demands an answer for leaving him behind after teaching him so many lessons about bonds and friendship. Yuri says that he has forsaken that name and now he goes by Black Knight, and Aram can't help but cringe after hearing his weave-ass emo edgelord comments. He says that he understands him and that being the hero, he had a lot of people who depended on him, and he wanted to meet all their expectations, but when he lost to the old fart, he lost faith in him, and this burden kept growing and growing until he turned emo. He then tells him to learn the secret art of not giving Fs and says that he doesn't have to meet anyone's expectations and asks him to tell him what he wants. Yuri says that he doesn't want anything, so he will act on his impulse to destroy everything and charges forward with a strong strike attack. He starts pushing him back and says that his words lack weight and resolve. Aram remembers Velner's words about resolving to kill Yuri when the time comes, and he decides to be respectful and uses his full strength. He holds his hand forward and concentrates bright mana into it, and then enhances his sword with it. He decides to use the same attack that he learned from Yuri, and says that the next attack will decide this battle, and charges straight ahead. Outside, Furball summons his magic weapon and saves Musica from falling down to her death. Yggdra steps in to protect the ancient artifact from getting attacked and tells Musica to continue her singing, and they restore the bard buff on the allied forces by getting rid of the dark element barrier. Shua asks Juliana about Aram, and she tells him that he went inside to deal with Yuri. Looking at them, Arena says that it's pointless because once you become a demon, you cannot turn back, but Shua shuts her up and says that Aram had the guts to speak up in front of him, so making impossible things possible shouldn't be that hard for him. Otherwise, giving him the Chain Chronicle would have been pointless. Hearing this, Irenaeus asks him if he is also a stupid weeb who talks about bonds and friendship and rains down small meteorites from the sky on the allied forces. But Shua surprises her by jumping out of the smoke and cutting her down. He tells her that he doesn't care about that protagonist weeb talk, and all that he respects is true strength. She jumps up and shoots him down with a bunch of fireballs, but Shua simply walks through them like a Giga-Chad and tells her that she is so weak. He then strikes her with a powerful energy slash and turns her into Grandma's ashes. On the other hand, the Black King decides to finish this world by corrupting the Chain Chronicle whole, but Fune uses her secret seal magic and calls upon the Chain Chronicle as its caretaker and absorbs all the darkness, corrupting it. She gets sick with blackening and her body starts rotting away, while the Black King looks at her dumb face and says that he can just corrupt the book once again by pouring more of his dark element into it. Meanwhile, Aram thinks that Yuri's armor is made up of the same dark element as the barrier outside, and so he should be able to break through it from the inside if he can strike him with his light mana. But Yuri slaps him back into a wall and tells him that he has no need for his white stuff. He goes on to strike him down, but then an arrow comes flying and hits him in his arm. He looks to the side and notices his former party members, Kane, Mishita, and Marina, walk inside the hall as they retrieve Aram and say that they are there to bring their captain back to his senses. Aram asks Kane if he is alright, and he says that he wouldn't die from a scratch like that, and then says that the volunteer army has always fought like this, where if one falls down, the other helps him get back up, and then looks at Yuri and asks if it's right. Aram tells Yuri that he is not alone, and then charges his light Rasengan and shares his plot armor-infused mana with the other members of the team. With that, they all prepare to land a combo attack on him, starting with Kane, who pushes him back and then lets Mishita shoot him with her arrows, and finally Marina traps her in her healing orb and lets Aram finish him off by breaking through his armor with his white mana. Inside Yuri's head, we see that he is still fighting against his dark emo self. Their fight continues as the emo boy keeps talking shit to him, but then Yuri receives Aram's light and becomes able to push through his darkness. He charges his sword and rushes towards his emo self, and then strikes through his heart and puts an end to his demonic days. On the outside, his armor breaks off and he comes out looking clean AF. After that, they all rush towards the throne room and see the Black King ready to infuse the Chain Chronicle with dark magic once again. Mishita begins the assault by shooting her arrows at him, followed by Kane and Aram, who jumps in with their swords. Yuri and Marina rescue Funa and start healing her, and she gets to recoup Yuri as well. While fighting them, the Black King notices that the white mana in Aram's hands is the light of Hexitas, which can destroy all kinds of darkness. He becomes mad and shoots a huge wave of dark energy at them and puts Kane and Mishita out of commission. He then opens up a portal and takes out a massive anime sword and starts teleporting around to attack Yuri and Aram at once. It feels like he took inspiration from that one Dragon Ball Z movie, but Yuri blocks his attack and says that he will defeat him and stop the blackening once and for all. Aram throws a ball of light mana at him and it reaches Yuri's sword, and he slashes the Black King down from front while Aram follows up with a strike on his back. Concentrated dark element starts pouring out of his wounds and the Black King erupts in a massive burst of dark energy. When the dark aura subsides, he turns out to be a black dragon now. He starts charging a strong-tailed beast bomb, but Furball jumps in and uses Tackle like a Pokemon. He then picks him up and flies up in the sky and makes Aram and Yuri follow behind on his magical flying weapons. Both dragons start having an incredible battle of energy beams and fire breaths in the sky, and our heroes decide to provide support as well. Aram charges in and annoys him like that one fly during summer, while Yuri crashes straight into his face and then stabs one of his eyes with his sword. The black dragon shakes him off and throws him down, but Aram comes in time to save him. But now they are both suspended in air, and the black dragon sees it as a chance to finish them both off with one attack. He starts charging his energy beam, but Furball uses Tackle once again and takes him down to the ground with him. They both crash land, and Furball transforms back into his furball form, and Aram comes down to rescue him. Meanwhile, the black dragon decides to go into another transformation like Frieza and turns out to be a Kaido copycat as a dragon-human hybrid. Feeling salty, he charges up a heavy dark energy attack and shoots Yuri with it, but Aram blocks it with his light Rasengan and pushes through. He then buffs Yuri with plot armor so he doesn't get slapped like the first time he fought the Black King, and then prepares to sink their mana, and they both decide to end this battle with a double wombo combo of Yuri's signature move. They push through the Black King's darkness and eventually manage to hit him with the light and get rid of all the dark elements within him. He turns back into his human form and falls down on the ground, and our heroes turn towards Funa, who is now dying due to a severe case of going black and not being able to come back. The not-so-black king gets up and calls upon the Chain Chronicles as its caretaker and trades his life force to cure Funa. And once that's done, everyone's hope returns, and as promised, Perica manifests herself into existence and reunites with her friends once again. With the Black King gone and the Chain Chronicle restored to its original state, the blackening around the world starts to fade away. All the undead soldiers vanish and peace returns to the lands. Juliana raises her sword and announces their victory, and just like that, we see everything return to normal. During his last moments, Fiona's father tells her to restore the world he destroyed using the real power of the Chain Chronicle, and we see our heroes once again depart on another journey across the sea. And that's how Season 1 of Chain Chronicle comes to an end.